Hello and welcome to Bread of Life, a daily devotional program which each week features a different area pastor. Our speaker for this week is Pastor Stephen Harvey of Bloomfield.
History records during the persecution of the Christians in 95 AD, under the rule of Roman Emperor Titus Flavian Domitian, John the Revelator was thrown into a vat of boiling oil. But he emerged miraculously when God saved the Apostle John from certain death. Ultimately, this is how he came to the Isle of Patmos, where Domitian had him banished. He was alone on that island when God's voice began to speak to him very powerfully. And thank God for his voice, because to Apostle John, being exiled and alone in life made everything look bleak and hopeless. It looked like this was the end of the church. He was the last and only one of the disciples that had not been martyred. John MacArthur brings out the fact that being left alive was worse off than being dead, because John's brother James was the first disciple to be martyred, and that death of his brother had so affected John. And then one by one, the other disciples were all murdered and killed, and John is left alone, and he's depressed. And he is here with scars on his body from the burns, isolated on an island by himself. Suddenly, heaven opens up in Revelation chapter 4 and verse 1. And the voice he heard, as it were, was like that of a trumpet, telling John, "Come up here and let me show you something." When you lean into these verses, it's as if God is trying to tell John and anyone else who is facing a low point in their life, you've had a bad day, you've had a bad week, you've had a bad year. I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to come up here. Let me show you heaven's perspective. Let you eavesdrop on a coming eternity that you're going to experience if you won't give up. And God's voice and God's love is still reaching to all people who have been strained and stretched emotionally by the trials of life. People who have been hounded with physical pain, people who have been harassed by financial difficulties, people who have been humbled by terrible domestic family issues that are taking place in their lives. But please hear this word, because Satan wants to keep our attention on our problems, not on our promises. Colossians 2:2 says, "Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." Many Christians often live shallow, earthbound lives, and that is what the devil wants us to do. The enemy wants to smother out of you the promise from John chapter 14 and verse 3, where Jesus said, "I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also." John said, "I looked up, I saw a door in heaven, and I heard a voice say, 'Come up here, peer into the paradise of God.'" It's a real place. It's not just a state of mind. Heaven is not just a sentimental dream. Heaven is not a figment of our imagination. Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you." God knew the trials would get so heavy, the burdens would get so real, the stresses of life would so overwhelm us, that there would come times and moments in our lives when we didn't need to view life from just down here, but we needed to come up higher and hear comforting words. The Bible says, "Comfort one another with these words." I don't care how bad things are. I promise you, they are going to get better in a place called heaven. The devil wants you to take heaven off of our radar screen, but don't let the antagonist of your soul take heaven off the table. 1 Peter 1, verses 3 and 4 says that you should rejoice greatly that you have an inheritance that fades not away, reserved in heaven for you. Verse 6 says, "Wherein you are to greatly rejoice in this hope."
You've been listening to Pastor Stephen Harvey of Bloomfield, and this has been Bread of Life, a program to encourage you from God's Word.